Hi everyone. Today I have with me Prajit Ghambir, who was kind enough to review my hands from the tournament that I shipped from the special Sunday KO. Prajit, thank you so much. Welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me, man. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
We have a lot of hands to go through. We won't be going totally in depth, but the idea is to think about how to think. Right, Prajit? That's how we're going to take it.
Correct. I want to start off by firstly congratulating you on your win.
Thank you, buddy.
So, the idea right now for us is obviously not to make this a super in-depth theory study session, but to obviously understand the mistakes that we're making and obviously try and learn from them. But at the same time, to kind of tweak and improve our thought process on the table when we're making decisions. That's the key here.
This tournament, we fired 2 bullets. You'll see why and where. Obviously, it's part of our review. And overall, if I could give a summary, as you can see, it was a deep tournament, a bounty nonetheless, but we played it very slow and steady, as you can see by the number of hands before we took our jumps in the tournament. So we are under the gun +1. We're fairly early in the tournament, so we just make a standard raise of 2.5. I think 3 is also acceptable,
that's
right?
Fine. It's fairly standard to make anything around 2.5 to 3x open. That should be fine from early position.
Here we get a flop and we check behind. What do you think of the check?
This is a board where you could actually sometimes c-bet and sometimes check behind as well. You can rep a 10 sometimes because there is a 10 in your range. You can have an ace 10. You can sometimes have a 10 jack as well. King 10 suited, and all of those hands are all opening hands with 200 big blinds. So you can obviously be c-betting and repping a 10 or repping 2 hearts and taking it away. Checking behind to improve is fine. Betting there is also fine. Not a big mistake here anyways.
And so Prajit, I'll tell you why I reviewed this hand. This person who I'm playing against, Y Podar, really aggressive, really aggressive. As you see, his c-bet was pot. Right. And this was not the first hand he was playing so aggressive. And that is why I have 2 overcards, and that's why I called his bet, because he was playing a little out of line very early in the tournament, raising, re-raising, pot betting. So I wanted to see a continuation hand. Do you think that's okay to call pot here in this situation?
To be honest, we've got 2 overcards, and we've also got some backdoor equity to make us straight. So from that perspective, at an early stage of a tournament, you could gamble up a bit and call this. But obviously then if we do not improve on the turn, I see that we are check folding more often than not.
Check, and we get another half pot bet and we let go. I guess that's pretty standard.
We let go. That's pretty standard. I mean, I do not see us folding almost always on the flop because our hand ace queen is underrepresented. It is a very strong hand. He obviously maybe does not put us on that hand, and we have a backdoor straight draw with 2 overcards, which we can obviously improve to. Call once and we fold the turn. That should be
so this is one of the hands which took away a big chunk of my stack while playing deep. I have the king queen suited, a pretty good hand to play, and we are in the big blind. Obzilla is a pretty good player. He ran deep, and I appreciate his game. I call with 2 other people here, and we hit top pair. And we check because we see him c-betting because obviously he was the aggressor. I want him to give him the chance. He bets pretty 66%, which is above a normal c-bet. So you can see that he's repping something strong. We flat call pretty much over here. Now this is a great card for us, right? You would think.
Yep.
So we bet. We're trying to rep a queen. I guess he is as well. The only thing going through my head is that he probably has an ace queen, and there are more combos out there of ace queen. He flats, and then we get an ace. So now I'm thinking maybe he boarded up, and so I check. I check to control the pot, and he bets large. He bets 3/4 or not. What are you thinking in this pot?
So he opens up, and his open sizing is around 3.5x, which is slightly on the higher side, but he has upwards of 400 big blinds. So that is fairly acceptable. That shouldn't be a problem. Button flats, we call. So button is out of the question here because that guy folds on the flop. The flop is favorable for us. We've got backdoor spades, and we also have the top pair with the king kicker. So the standard play is something that you have continued to do with. I would obviously be checking and calling here in a lot of spots. And at this point in time, if we try to figure out what his range could be on the flop without going into too much detail, he can obviously have a similar hand as ours, which is a king-queen hand. Even though we block queens, he can have queens in that situation. Obviously, turn pe queen aa jata hai, so there is no possibility of him having those. But at that point in time, but he can obviously have an ace queen as well. Let's not forget pocket 7s and pocket 8s are also in his range at that point in time. So those are hands that he will be playing with, right? So
that's right.
considering that. So the turn is also a good card. I do not mind the lead. I also do not mind check calling or check raising in those spots, right? I do not have any problem, because still, if we were ahead on the flop, it only makes our hand stronger on the turn, if you see my point, right? If we were ahead and we check called on the flop, we're still ahead and we're super strong now on the turn. So leading is fine. But I would, if my opponent I feel is bluffing, then I would most likely be checking here with that queen also, because from the big blind, I have a lot of 7-8 sort of hands as well, and he can put me on those hands, and he can rep a queen and still be bluffing, and it's an easy call for me from the big blind. So I would be check calling the turn as well, most likely. You led out, it's fairly fine. Not a long discussion on this, because it's something that it's not too problematic. The turn is an ace, obviously, which only improves one hand for him, right? He can obviously have kings and aces as well in his range. Let's not be mistaken, because he's the pre-flop aggressor, right? He has those hands. So he can either have aces full, or he can have queens full of aces. Those are two hands that absolutely crush you. But let's not forget hands like sevens and eights, which he can also have in his range. But I really do not see how we truly get away from this hand the way
that was my question.
So we do not have a lot of chances of getting away, especially considering at that point in time, that this guy is a pro and he's aggressive, and he might be applying pressure on you, because he does not think that you have a queen most often in that big blind, and that too a strong queen, right? He could be betting into you with let's say if you had a hand like queen 5 here, right? You would be more inclined to fold, because your opponent can have a better queen, right? A better queen, like his queen 10 beats you, his queen jack beats you. But in all honesty, he also has queen 10 and queen jack in his range, suited queen 10 and queen jacks in his range, which you beat, right? Which you beat at this point in time. So calling here is something that I do not consider as one of the big mistakes that you would make in a tournament. And especially you have the blinds to call him off as well. And if he's bluffing, so be it. But if he has sevens, eights, or ace queen there, we can't do much.
So Prajit, I did call. I'll show you his hand as well, but why I'm not showing it to you right now, because in hindsight, what I see is that there's a 52 big blind pot right there, right? So that I've put in 26 big blinds, and now I have to put another 42 big blinds, which is almost a third of my current stack, which I'm still holding. So is that a part of the process to not call and fold, or is that too nitty?
A couple of things go hand in hand here. You have to put in 41 and a half or 42 big blinds to win a pot of 93, right? Firstly is that. So if you consider that, you're getting better than 2-1 to call, right? You need somewhere around 33% equity to be good here, right? In order to win. So keeping all of those aspects in mind, then you look at your hand strength, and in reality, you have a 3 of a kind, right? And then you look at the hands that you actually can beat. Right, you're beating a queen 10, you're beating a queen jack, you're beating a queen 9 sort of a hand. These are all hands that he might be opening with. Obviously, be opening with 450 big blinds, to be honest. He has 400 big blinds plus. His opens should be much, much wider, and he should be playing a lot of hands in that spot, and mostly suited hands, right? So you're beating a lot of hands, and you're beat by a couple of hands which have some limited combos, let's say of sevens and let's say of eights, let's say an ace queen. And so having said that, I would still be forced to call here.
Not to keep you, he had pocket sevens. You're right. I had discounted that. It's pretty disguised, isn't it? Because when I was playing, it didn't come to my mind in a jiffy.
It all comes down to thinking about the hands that he will play from that particular spot with, and also thinking that he went about 3.5x, which obviously is not a giveaway for sevens, eights, or even an ace queen. He could do that 3.5x with an ace queen also. But typically on that board, when we almost hit everything, you see my point? The point here is, my thought process is, the board is queen 8-7 rainbow. I have top pair, top kicker. I have a backdoor flush draw. He bets into me. So considering his HUD, I believe his C-bet is 50%. So it's average, it's standard. He's not C-betting 100% of the times. So I'm assuming he has some value hands here. Okay, so now the turn is a queen. Imagine what happens in his head. When you call him on the flop, he assumes that, okay, this guy has a queen, this guy might have an 8, this guy might have a 7. Okay. But when there's a queen, his pocket kings also have to slow down. All right. His pocket aces also have to slow down. His pocket jacks have to slow down. These are some hands that he could be betting with, right? So he has to feel that he's behind. But when he still continues to call your bet, so that's why I said if you check and he still bet there, but we led, that's fine.
You get more information.
We get some information, because if he's still continuing on a board that hits us on the flop and the turn, then is when we can actually narrow down his range to something like 7s and 8s. And he for surely put us on a queen there, because his sizing was on the higher side. If he thought that we have an 8, he's blocking all 7s, so we do not have a 7 pair, and we most likely fold a 7 on the river, right? If we have an 8, he would most likely size down a bit if he wants to get a call out of an 8, because an 8 would not most likely be calling that particular hand, because the ace hits his range more than it hits ours. You see my point? He's the pre-flop aggressor. But on the big blind, we really do not have an ace, more likely than not, right? So he's trying to rep that hand. He's targeting a queen, which he was absolutely correct in doing, and he got paid off. We can't really avoid that spot.
Okay, guys, it's here. The pocket aces. Please raise Popzilla. Please raise Poddar. Please. अरे यार थोड़ा तो 3-bet बनता है ना, like मामूली सा. Like guys, just 11. Shagun का. I want you guys to play. Take my bounty. आ गया. All in. आ गया. Guys, fingers crossed. Let's do this. Just hold. Please hold. Guys, are you kidding me? What the hell just happened? This makes for good TV, but it's expensive, bro. Not a joke.
That is sick. We 3-bet, we get jammed on, we snap call, we try to hold. If we can't, we fire another bullet. That's how life is.
That's what we did. And the second bullet worked, man. We shipped it.
Yep.
Back in. We in the big blind with 143 big blind. So we ran it up a bit. And we get a standard. So I want to talk about who's raising here. This is 3-bet Panda.
I know that's Gaurav Sood.
Yep, he is. And I kind of know him too. I met him in Goa a couple of times. I'm sure you played up against him. So he's a good experienced player. And so far, his name is 3-bet Panda, but he hasn't even min raised for the last half an hour. He's just chilling, man, like a panda. And so when he opens, I'm surprised. It was that surprising, basically. So we just flat call from the big blind as we should. And we have an open ender, as you can see. I lead out to him. What do you think about the lead?
All right. Imagine what his range would look like here. He has a lot of good hands. Like you said, he's been playing a little on the tighter side, as you've just mentioned. So keeping that in mind, he could have a large variety of hands there, right? He could have all the big hands. He could have all the medium strength hands. He could have over pairs. He could have an ace-9, which is top pair, top kicker. He could have a king-9 and all of those hands. I'm not going into too much detail, but he has a wide variety of hands that he could have in that spot. The reason why I would not want to lead here is because what happens when we get raised? Where we have an open ender, which means a 10 is good and a 5 is good, right? And there are approximately 4 and 8 cards that are good for us on future streets, right? So that'll basically give us somewhere close
32%.
to about 32%. Okay. Putting our money in and calling big raises in this spot in a 70-30 situation is not favorable. So I like to check call and realize my equity, because check calling in these spots allows us to realize our equity for cheap.
In this position, because obviously we can't get away so easily. Bit pair, but I'm not too happy about it, and because I got check raise, so I just check, and he bets in again he bets in more than half, right? So I just put it down. I call. Sorry, I should have put it down. See, so I'm chasing now. I'm literally chasing. What do you think about this?
We bet 3 big blinds there, and we would have called 3, and we would have kept the pot small, and we would have made a pair with now an open ender on the turn. And he would have, and the pot would have been small, so he would have never been betting 19.5 big blinds on the turn, and the turn would have also been an easy call for us, right? That 9 is, and if he thinks that he beats a 9 and he's raising us, then obviously an 8 is no good for us. But at the same time, we've now increased the number of outs that we have. Mind this call primarily from one reason, on one reason only, which is that we gain some outs. Is that we made a mistake on the flop, and we could have avoided this entire scenario where we would have had to call these big bets by just check calling on the flop and check calling the turn.
It's a pattern coming in my league where I am bloating the pot out of position.
Yep. Raw. Either we are check raising, and when we feel that our opponent is c-betting too wide and he does not have anything here and he does not hit the board, or we're check calling to realize our maximum equity.
We are in the big blind with pocket sevens. We have around 85 big blinds, and we are min raised by the button, which is pretty standard play. I re-raise it to 9. Yeah, so obviously I was half inclined, or more than half inclined, towards just flatting and realizing my equity, as you were saying. In case I hit a 7,
Sure.
I get paid off well. But somehow I was like, I wanted to show aggression because he was also a shorter stack than I was. So I thought if I could realize it here and then, good for me. But what do you think of the pre-flop race?
I do not mind it that much because button usually isn't that strong, right? There's a big chance that you take it down pre-flop.
And obviously we get the dreaded ace high in this case. So what I do is I lead out. Why I lead out is I assume that when he is raising from the button, a lot of the time he doesn't have the ace. And when I'm 3-betting, I can rep the ace. What do you think about that?
That's fine. I mean, if you're 3-betting, if you're the pre-flop aggressor, I don't mind a 30% c-bet on that board. But if we get called, we slow down. That's how we see it. To put pressure on his weaker aces, we'll have to barrel multiple times. But to be honest, not getting into too much detail here, when he calls us on the flop, we should be looking at getting away from this.
Again, because I don't feel good about this, that he's check called once. And here's the thing, he jams a little above pot size, and I don't blame him because his SPR is almost, as you can see,
it's almost
1:1. So in this case, I just let go. What do you think about that?
That's fair. That's a fold.
Fine, right?
I mean, to be honest, when you in your mind, you'd let go of this hand once you got called on the flop, right?
Right.
So folding that river should not be a big discussion in your head because even if he'd not jam and if it put half of his pot in there, I don't think he was still calling, right?
And we have pocket tens under the gun. We make a 3x raise. We get flat called by Ganesh. Ganesh, I don't have many reads on him, but I saw him calling pretty often. Not because he's like flat called us and there's a queen on the board or a higher card we're supposed to check back. But I make a continuation bet to look strong because there are a lot of other. It's a dry board compared to apart from the queen, and there are aces, kings, and things which can obviously come down. And I don't want him to realize that. And it's part of his range when he flat calls me from there. He just calls. So at this point, I bet again. Why? I know he could have a queen top end. That's why he just flat called me. But it also makes the probability of him having a queen less. See myself checking. I should have, but I just make a small bet. I'm trying to get a value bet or something over here. I can't even remember why I made this bet, to be very honest.
Okay.
So I guess this is a standard fold, or I should have not made these bets. What do you think about the continuous betting that I did over here? Because I saw the queens pair up.
Sure. When we were opening from under the gun and under the gun +1 flats, right? Our ranges are very conflicting. Our ranges are very, very close to each other. We're going to be flatting very, very strong hands as well. Sometimes I've seen people flat jacks as well in that spot, right? What your perceived range is in his mind, right? If he thinks, Raj is playing tight, and Raj is going to open his super premium hands, and Raj has all his aces, kings, queens, and all those type of hands in his range from under the gun, and he's playing that 7.5% opening range from under the gun or whatever that is, he's going to be flatting some of those hands and not 3-betting you that often, right? He has some other hands as well. He has some 5s, which he's going to flat with. He has some 6s, 7s, and 8s, and 9s as well that he's flatting, right? The way I would maybe play my pocket 9s, sometimes, and maybe play my pocket 8s, because those are the hands which are going to have the same thought process as you. Right. Let's say if you had pocket 9s here and you were in his spot, you would call once, right? And then you would see another queen. You would call again because you're thinking now he doesn't have a queen. The probability of him having a queen is lesser. So you would call there. And then a 9 comes in and you make a boat, right? So he could have 9 sometimes. He tendencies in the Indian market. I do not see a lot of players jamming on the river like that as a bluff. So that's not a
41 big blinds, and we min open with pocket 2s. We're trying because you see our position here, the button's right here. So we don't mind taking any folds we get. So hence the raise. 2 other callers, and we get jammed on by Con Kid. Now
that's Ruben, right?
I am guessing why I called. It's bounty. I'm losing around a little more over half my stack. I'm still in the game, but if I do win, I win decent. Think about the call.
The bounty has a value here, right? Which
Right.
is directly, it has two values. In a bounty tournament, you're obviously picking up chips, but along with that, you're also making money on the side, which goes directly into your bank.
Right.
So from that perspective, I don't mind a call, but you need to also take into consideration your hand strength here, which is at best you're 50-50 because he always has two overcards to you. And at
Right.
worst, you're 20%.
80-20. Yeah.
80-20, right? A super favorable call for you. Best you're 50-50, at worst you're 80-20. And if you average that out, you're more likely behind. You're more often going to lose this hand. This have another problem. They always get counterfeited as well. The thought processes that I want you to keep in your head with deuces is specifically that it's 50-50 at best and it's 80-20 at worst. So
I think sevens and better would be a better call.
An easy call for you, right?
Sevens and better,
you
right?
should be call. Yeah, that's fine because sevens and eights are hands where he could be jamming worse hands than yours as well, right?
You get a jam by under the gun of around say 14 big blinds. We have around 38-40 big blinds, but the problem here is I have ace jack suited offsuit and I have more than half the table behind me to act. I was considering a fold. What do you think?
To be honest, in this particular spot, it's never a flat call. You see my point? It's always a rejam because you want others to fold, especially in a bounty tournament. Because when you rejam, you show a lot of strength. Because when we construct ranges, the under the gun guy who only has 14 big blinds will have a fairly wide jamming range. It's not like he's going to be waiting for his aces and kings. He would be jamming an ace 10 here as well, right? And which you dominate looking at. And rejamming most often would allow you to go through everybody else unless and until somebody wakes up with a very strong hand right now. But if we are post late registration, you would obviously be getting a lot more folds. But if we're pre late registration, I know a lot of pros who would be happy to just call you off with an ace 10 suited as well sometimes here. And ace king though is calling you. Here's the thing: when you just flat call here, what I want you to think of what is the message that somebody else on the table receives. Okay, so what are the hands you're flat calling with? Hands that you're not too comfortable with going all in with, right? Which is the case right here. And sometimes hands
you'll be
that
flatting
are
aces
too
also.
strong.
Exactly.
Exactly what I'm coming to. Sometimes when you're too strong, I just personally feel that I want to go heads up with this guy because my point is, let's say you
Got
flat,
it.
and somebody else also flats behind you.
The equity gets
You will
diluted.
be out of A, the equity gets diluted. B, you're playing post flop with ace jack off out of position, right? And you might not hit anything, and you might get barreled off that hand. And it's just not profitable to be.
I look at the pot, I'm like, okay, I need to put, 13 more in to play a pot of, 70.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going anywhere here. So I just flat here and we hit the top pair, right? Now, this is like, I know it was what it is, but I got sweet trapped into it almost because, if he would have jammed, I could have probably folded, but because he just makes it 2x, it's like too inviting. Luckily, and I do not have a problem saying when I did get lucky. And obviously it's a 44 big blind pot. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm just going to jam, right? Because I have top pair, top kicker. And
he's calling you.
He's calling me and we run it out and he has ace king, right? And ace 3 or whatever. We did get lucky here, but post flop, we didn't have a choice. We were top pair, top kicker. We didn't have much of a stack left behind. But in hindsight, yes, a jam would have made much more sense.
I'm not sure why he min raised you there. I'm not really sure about that. And I'm also not very sure about why you would just call with and have 11 big blinds behind. I mean,
I know that's also a mistake. Yeah, you should rejam.
I'm just thinking that if I'm putting another 13, why would I even need my 11 remaining? I would just go all in with that sometimes.
Okay,
most of the
make
times.
a point of that. Makes sense.
So
this is one table before the final table, and we have Sugani who's there on the big blind. We make a standard raise, and he jams with 23 big blinds. Now he's been playing fairly loose. He could be doing this with ace 10 as well. The way he's been playing, the style he's been playing, and his frequency as well. So. I did, and then obviously there were two bounties in play, right? So that did affect my judgment. I'll be very honest. I saw two bounties over there and pocket nines think we could have folded here.
Not open. Can you see that he's got 2 there?
Oh, sorry. Yes, he did open. He did open. He min opened.
Yeah. So that's what. So now here is the thing. Now when we go 3 here, I don't know what message that gives across, right? So
the message was the message was a misclick.
Yeah. It's like basically we're going somewhere close to about 6 big blinds, and then
6 or 7. Yeah,
much more easier for us to call. I see merit in calling as well here. I just don't. So the under the gun could be very, very strong here. That's the point. So I do not know Sugani personally. Based on the brief that you've given me right now, that if he's a loose aggressive player and he's the one who actually has the bigger stack out of the 2, right? You need to take into consideration the fact that you will be the one who will be busting him, not the under the gun guy who's got 12 big blinds because he's shorter, right? He might double up, but you might take Sugani's stack if he's the loose aggressive guy. So in this particular spot, it's a trade-off. You see my point? The point is you might be behind Singh, but you might be ahead of Sugani. So that's the call that you have to make at that point in time. It has 2 bounties as well. You might just beat both of them, hit your 9 and go on a merry-go-round and just chill.
So calling his jam is essentially, with the information we have, is okay.
Is okay, considering that he is fairly loose and he's doing this with mostly a very, very wide range. Then against a very wide range, 9s would do above average. So he could have 8s also here, right?
Right, true. He would do the same with 8s. So we do run out, and he does show. He hits his set. He had 10, so 10s and 9s still very close, I guess. I could see that, but obviously we get short stacked. We get short stacked from here just before 50. That was the challenge, but that's what makes it interesting, right? So I think I'm going to review this because these were the jumps I had to take, the risks I had to take. Because I'll tell you what my mindset was over here. Here we go. As I told you, we were just before the final table. This is the table before the final table, and
last 2 tables 5-handed, right?
Yes. So now my mentality was, buddy, I'm going to enter the final table with a decent stack, or I'm going to go home. I'm going to be okay with going home, but I do not want to reach the final table for the heck of the final table with like 5 big blinds. Just here, as you can see, Vadu Chuk is the chip leader, and the other stacks, apart from Ufano, who's a pro and he was playing back, he was pushing us around, so as to say. So here, as you can see, Vadu Chuk is the chip leader, and the other stacks, apart from Ufano, who's a pro and he was playing back, he was pushing us around, so as to say. So what I did here was I obviously made a raise. I was happy with just taking the blinds, and he jams. He's clearly targeting me because he covers me. He covers the person on the left. And in this case, because I block a lot of the aces, I do have some equity here. I decide to call. He had pocket 7s, but what do you think of me calling his jam?
Firstly, we started with this hand with 18 big blinds. Now, 18 for some people might be very short stack, but in reality, it is not. Right. So we still have certain hands that we can open fold with 18 big blinds. We still have an open fold range here. So, but the idea is when we do open, we never open to 3x here. So I would want you to size down your pre-flop open sizing. Considering you have 18 big blinds, you can't open 1/6 of your entire stack as an open, right? So we need to size down there, and if you open 2 big blinds there, that's 1/9 or 1/10 approximately of your entire stack, and that is not putting in a lot of money, and that will also allow us to open a slightly wider range of hands, and also be able to fold versus an aggressive jam or something like that, and save a big chunk of our stack. Now, said that instead of open calling this guy, I would be open jamming an ace-8 more profitably. Because like you said, if you take into consideration the kind of blockers and the thought process that you had to call him off, I'd suggest you take the power of initiative in your hand and jam in these spots, right? And this one fold, you have an ace-x hand. You are the shortest. You're the second shortest stack on the table. You've got the least or close to very little ICM considerations at this point in time because the pay jumps are not the biggest right now, right? They're the biggest on the final table.
Very marginal right now.
Yeah, very, very marginal pay jumps. So we need to take that into consideration and be jamming and taking the initiative rather than open calling with these hands. Like ace-8 is a hand where I would most likely open and then fold because it's something that somebody would raise me with a better hand than ace-8 for sure.
Absolutely.
Right? And 7s was a better hand.
It was.
Right? It's good for us that we had 2 overs, but he obviously had the stack to gamble with us. If we jam here, we put him in a spot, right? Now he could be in a spot where, my point is, he could be in a
or half a stack, right?
For half a stack, he would have to make a decision whether he should be calling with that hand or not. Let's change this example a bit, and I'll tell you. Let's say he had fours there, right? Fours, he might be thinking in a different way. And he say, "Man, I'm going to jam my sevens, but let me just flat call with my fours here." So you see what happens if you had fours in that spot when you're against your ace-8 open. But if you jammed, you most likely sometimes force him to fold those fours in that particular spot, and you take that spot away.
So we realize our fold equity basically in the spot.
Exactly. Okay. Because that's the idea. We still have a decent stack to have fold equity. If we want to take the initiative and jam ourselves to apply max pressure on others before they think of even calling us, because we have fold equity still with us. The second thing is, we do not want to be opening that big. We do not want to be opening 3x at this stage of the tournament with that kind of a stack size. And we also need to take into consideration that we do not always have to play a push fold strategy with 18, 19 big blinds. We still have an open fold strategy in a 5-handed play.
This is the final table. We have 4 people left. I'm chip leading, and I have Infig 11. I think he was with me on the final table again when I'd shipped my previous tournament this week only.
Okay.
Pretty good player. He's also part of our group, by the way, the Monster Group. The normal, and he jams here in this situation, and he has half my stack size. So, and he's been playing pretty tight, and I know he knows his game, and I know he knows the ICM implications. And so I make a fold. What do you think of the fold in this spot?
So let's say he's been playing fairly tight, right? And also take into consideration that now the pay jumps are high. We're on the final table. There are 4 people left. We're all playing for the crown. We're all playing for the podium finish. Nobody wants to come fourth. Everyone wants to come first, right? And there's bounty involved. And have a look at this Mr. Blackie, right? Mr. Blackie has 7.7 big blinds. And in FIC 11 understands that. Him and Sogani are sitting pretty nicely at the second place and the third place spot, right? And they're in their minds, to be honest, waiting for Mr. Blackie to bust. Okay. So they would be slightly on the tighter side against when they're playing these particular hands. So my point being, if he's jamming like that, he's obviously super strong. He's nutted. He's taking a chance that, you know what, man, this is the hand that I can go broke with. So those hands are very, very limited at this point in time, right? Jam against a chip leader because he's taking into consideration the fact that you are going to be opening a wider range of hands because you have almost 2-1 advantage over him and Sagani, right? You had about 40 big blinds when you started this hand, and they had about 19 and 20 big blinds. I just do not see him being loose here because Mr. Blackie is down to 7.7 big blinds, and he is on the verge of going out, and he can just have an easy pay jump day by waiting for Mr. Blackie to bust.
So but decent fold for us, right? In this case,
I think that qualifies as a decent fold. Yeah, that qualifies.
So
as a decent
we
fold
saw the replay. We saw the replay, and he had Ace King suited.
Yeah.
And PS.
Like I said, that's one of those hands that he's willing to go broke with, right?
Now we are heads up in this situation, and with Devang in FIC 11, and so the strategy or the thing I have in. So by the way, what happened here? I just want to give you a little background. You might or might not know. When we were 3-way, there was a deal discussion happening, and my system crashed. Okay. So for a good couple of hands, I was sitting out as the chip leader.
All right.
And I just came back and I saw Infik bust the other person, and he became chip leader. Okay. And we were like, I think my chips, it was 25 big blinds to 40 something big blinds or something like that, or 50 big blinds, 2:1. I was the underdog. And so we built it up from there to this spot, right? And we were playing fairly aggressive because I know heads up, you can't afford, your range has to be very wide. So in this spot, I was raising standard 2.5. I know it should have been 2.2, but 2.5 was my standard.
My point is, you can even size down to 2x. I forgot to mention this in the previous hand. Say you're on the final table, and this is something which is very important for everybody to understand. Whoever's viewing this, if you're on the final table and there are about 7 to 8 players or even 6 players on the table, More often than not in these Indian tournaments, everyone's shallow. And the effective stack that you get into a pot with is also shallow. So keeping that in mind, you can open 2x as well. That's pretty much standard in these later stages of a tournament. The final two tables, the top 15, the top 10, the final table and stuff like that. Opening 2x is a fairly standard spot.
In this case, we get some good news. He 3-bets us because we've been playing so aggressively throughout and opening. And I wanted him to be in this spot, right? Where I have a premium hand and he 3-bets me. Now I jam here with my stack. And so he has a opportunity to take the title right here and there. I am shorter than him. So what do you think of the jam, or should I have just flatted? It's another thing that he folded. But what do you think of the jam, 4-bet jam?
You can jam. You can also re-raise him sometimes. Considering you have that amount of depth, I'm just looking at the stack sizes. I believe when he 3-bet you had somewhere around 30 bigs. So you can take his 6.7 to somewhere around 14, something like that. That would also get you a fold. But the honest truth is he will call you down with certain hands which will have aces and kings and ace x and king x hands in that particular scenario, and you don't want that. So jamming is fine. I just do not have a big problem with you jamming there. It is one of those spots where if he has an ace 10, ace king, ace jack, he will most likely call you down. It's also one of those spots if he has 10s, 9s, 8s, 7, 6, jacks, all of those hands will call you down. So jamming is fairly acceptable in this spot.
Because I didn't want to slow play my premium hands here because I wouldn't have minded flipping and getting there.
You would have been in position even if you'd flatted, but that's fine. Jamming, you want to get your money in. That's the point. So it's fair, because if he genuinely has a 3-betting hand here, which is like a 10s or a jacks or a 9s or an 8s even, which he would 3-bet you with if you're playing fairly wide and aggressive, he would be 3-betting you with those hands heads up, because trust me when I say this, any pocket pair heads up is very, very strong.
Very strong.
Pre-flop. So if he has a genuine hand there, he would have called you. So I believe he's 3-betting you wide in this particular scenario because you would have been opening wide for a long time and you jammed and he folded.
So that's where we wanted him. Okay, I don't have it here. But I'll just explain the spot. I had around 30 big blinds and someone jammed and I had ace king and he had 15 big blinds. I had 30 big blinds. So the math in my head was, I was thinking, you know what? I can fold because I was in a comfortable position. I was still, I was around say 10 or 20 or something, just to give you an estimate. But I realized that if I took this flip and I lose, I go a little down the ladder, considerably down the ladder with 10, 15 big blinds if I lose. But if I win and this is a flip, it would put me in a more winning position. Right. And I took that risk. I took that call. He had pocket 10s. I had ace king and I hit my ace on the river. So what do you, I just want to know what you think about this mindset and this call. And obviously the bounty was involved, but my mindset was this.
A while ago, right?
Yeah.
Where I said at best you're 50-50 and at worst you're 80-20.
Yeah.
Right? Ace king, the reason why ace king is considered a very strong hand is primarily because it obviously when you study, you understand ace king, like any other hand, flops nothing. I mean 65% of the times you'll hit nothing. But the remaining percent of the times you will at least have 2 overcards, right? And ace king also has the ability to block aces and kings significantly, right? That is why it's a good hand. And then with ace king, considering a 15 big blind jamming range, at best, if he has queens, you have 50%. At worst, for you, if he has queens, you have 50% against his queens also, since you're blocking aces and kings. I'm not discounting the fact that he could have aces and kings in that spot as well. But for the sake of argument, I'm going to say he has queens and you have close to about 50%. But if you construct his entire jamming range there, he has a lot of worse ace-x hands as well.
Right.
He has a king queen suited as well. He has ace jack. He has an ace 10. He has an ace queen. And then he obviously has these pocket 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, jacks and queens, which you're 50.
So folding this would be negative EV, right?
Yeah, I don't think we should be folding this hand. It is too strong to be folded in that spot. You give yourself a lot of chance of winning. So like I said, you're 50-50 at worst with discounting aces and kings here. But you are 70-30 and doing very, very well against an ace jack or an ace queen or an ace 10 suited hand in that particular spot. So we want to take these chances and try and hit our hand. That is how we win tournaments.
This was the final hand. So just to give you a heads up, after that queen's hand and after a little back and forth, now we are in the marginal lead. So and I have two questions. One is about the hand. The second is about deal making, because I'm a noob to deal making. I'll be very honest with you. And to be really, really candid, if my computer hadn't crashed and I was chip leading, I would have probably just gone for the title without any deal making, because I was fairly strong. But I did make the deal. So what are the things that come into your head when you want to go for deal making and things?
Two criteria. One is how strong the other player is, right? If I consider him equal or better than me, then I'm more inclined to make the deal, because at the end of the day, see, at this point in time, you both are fairly deep. And this is one tournament where you were lucky enough to play a deep stack tournament, right? You both have 40 bigs. In a lot of other situations and a lot of different tournaments on a lot of different platforms, you would find yourself in situations where both you and the other guy heads up on the final table will have around 18 big blinds or 20 big blinds or 17 big blinds. And you would find yourself in spots where you'll realize that you're no longer playing post-flop poker. You're playing pre-flop jamming, you're push folding. Right. In those situations, a deal is a much more profitable scenario, because in a lot of situations, you could get unlucky even when you're chip leading and finish second. So if the guy is equal stacked and the guy is a decent poker player, I do not mind doing a deal, right? But then obviously there are some people who like to play, and then we obviously have to play with them. So that's also fair. But my idea behind deal making is that if I have a significant chip lead, which is better than 2-1, then I would play and try and wrap the game up. Exactly, wrap it up and we take the title home. But if we don't have that significant chip lead and we know the player is a good enough player and we're all shallow stacked, then I would be inclined towards doing a deal.
When we were three-way, we were chip leading fairly decently. And then when we came back after the crash, we were, after the third person got eliminated, we were the underdogs. So I guess that was what was on my mindset. I was fighting so hard not to get tilted at the current scenario that, that's why I was focusing on the game. And when the deal came, I said, okay, let's take it. Hand, I'm just going to go ahead. So we've been playing background, same, min raising, everything. Almost everything. And we are in position, so why not? So we hit a very strong hand here. We hit our set. And we check behind. Obviously, I want him to catch up in this case, even though there's a flush draw right there.
How I would play my middle set or my bottom set, I would just bet it here. He can have a large range of hands that he will call us with. He will call us with all spades.
Yes.
He will call us with overcards, because we're not betting too big, right? We're betting small and we want some value from our hands. And we don't really need a lot of protection. We only need protection against two spades that he might have in his hand sometimes. But he's going to call us with a deuce pair as well. He's going to call us with an 8x hand as well. He's going to call us with a 5-6. He's going to call us with a 6-7.
And overcards and everything.
And overcards. And we can get a lot of value by just betting one street.
In this case, he does c-bet when he hits his 9, which is a pretty strong bet. But I am willing to take a risk here, because we've already made the deal. We're playing for the title, right? And I jam, because I have been jamming on him with fairly strong hands, and I see that he could have possibly made top pair or a middle pair, and I'll still get paid off. But technically, I just want to know what you think of it. Could we have played more conservatively?
Here's the thing. Firstly, he donks into you on the turn, right? Which obviously brings up a few questions in our head. And now you jam. So the point is, I do not see him calling us with a one pair hand here. Okay. Because he's not committed to the spot. He still has 33 big blinds left. So if he has an 8 there, or if he has a weak 9, and you jam and you show so much strength, you can obviously be representing two pairs on this board. You could obviously be representing a flush on this board, and all of those hands would beat his single pair hand. And if he's good enough, he can lay down a single pair hand in this spot. So be calling you with
a better
let's say a pair with a flush draw, which is a nutted flush draw or a king high flush draw or an ace high flush draw. He should be calling you with those type of hands. He should be calling you with two pair hands. He should be calling you with a hand like a 10 jack with one spade. You see my point? Then he has an open-ended spade draw with a flush draw as well. So all of those hands would obviously be calling you. Like all monster draws are not folding in this particular spot. But since you're deep, single pair hands should be folding to your jams. He should have something better to be calling you here.
So
reason why he leads into you on the turn. A lot of players do this when this is one of those basic lines I've seen a lot of people play. You can see this online, you can see this in the Indian field as well. When a draw completes, and which in this case is a flush draw, I've seen a lot of people just lead out on the turn, especially when the flop goes check, check, especially when the pre-flop aggressor, which is you, has checked behind the flop in position. So the other guy, your opponent, the villain in this particular case, will lead out of position and donk bet into you when the draw gets there on the turn. So in this particular spot, I don't think necessarily feel that he has a lot, but we can be raising him here because our hand is very, very disguised. We can also just be calling him because we still have a lot of outs, but we now need a little bit of protection because another spade is not good for us.
Exactly.
Right? So we should most likely be raising here because we're deep enough to do that. And jamming is something where if he has a flush, we're really putting our entire stack at risk, which is something that I just do not appreciate doing in these spots because we've come so far and we want to just get the win. And at this point in time, jamming here and putting our entire stack at risk is not favorable, even though we will still have about 10 outs, right? Because we'll have 3 8s, 3 deuces, 3 9s, and 1 4 to make quads as well, right? So we'll have 10 outs, we'll have about 20% equity, a little more than 20% equity.
But still, because he's calling wide, he could have it. Yeah.
So we should not be jamming because he can have a flush sometimes.
Over here. So I guess that's what happened psychologically. I shoved and he called, and he had called with top. He did just call with the top pair. He did not have the thing. I mean, obviously, both of us could have played it better, but these were the factors, unsaid factors, which our viewers won't know. That by the end of the grind, you're all over the place. Actually, shoving. There's a lot of 3-betting. So eventually, and that is where you want to guide to get that. Okay, this guy is bluff raising me a lot. Right? Yeah. And I got to call him down with something. And he thinks that, top pair is some equity against this guy who's a major bluffer.
Yep.
But I might not be a major bluffer, but I just play aggressive in the right spots. So we got him there at the sweet spot was more of it rather than the strength of the hand, to be very honest.
Agreed. The only thing that I am a little surprised with is that this you both were still very deep. I would have not had this conversation if you both were 15, 16 big blinds deep.
That was it. Those were the hands we had. I skipped over a few, but these are the key hands that we'd gone through. And as I was saying, as we started the session, I had shown everyone how we started slow and then actually went boom, boom at the key spots. Anything else you would like to add after the reviews that you've seen?
For everybody who's watching this video, and these are mistakes that I think everyone makes from time to time, and these are not major mistakes, but the idea is to actually see the impact that these mistakes can have on future streets. So, like I said, we want to just be very, very careful with our open sizing. In early stages of a tournament and also in the late stages of a tournament, we want to figure out what the effective stack is and should we size down in terms of our open sizing. Same goes with our c-bet sizing as well. We don't want to be overbloating the pot sometimes. Also, one mistake that I've seen in this particular hand review, which is pretty common, to be very, very honest. So it's not something that we want to talk a lot about, but is to be donk betting out of position on the flop or even on the turn, because what that does is if we donk bet with our draws and we get raised, we do not get the right price to be chasing our draws. The idea is to check call or maybe check raise in those particular spots depending on who your opponent is. If you feel your opponent is c-betting 100% of the times, check raising is a profitable play. If you feel that your opponent is balanced with the c-bets, then check calling is the play because you can realize your equity much better in out of position scenarios in those times. Beyond this, obviously late position open sizing, we can obviously reduce down from 2.5, sorry, not late position, later stages in a tournament, we can reduce our 3-bet, our open sizing to 2x instead of 2.5x because the effective stacks on the table are fairly low. People are jamming quite wide, and we also want to keep that into consideration. One more thing that we want to pick up in terms of takeaways is that when you're under 20 big blinds, around 17, 18 big blinds, don't start panicking. The idea is you need to see what the effective stack size is. You need to see how short you are in reality. You might be 18 big blinds and you might start thinking, oh man, I'm reaching a push push fold scenario, I need to start open jamming my hands and I need to change my ranges a bit. You need to start reevaluating that and understanding that you still have some open fold scenarios from late position. And you also want to keep your open sizing smaller at that point in time. You don't want to go 3x because you're committing too much of your stack if you're 18, 17 big blinds. You want to go small and then you want to fold certain hands. And remember what we spoke about in these scenarios. If you have a marginally strong hand in later positions and you're on a 5-handed table or a 6-handed table and you're say on the button or the cutoff, you want to jam yourself, right? Instead of opening and being jammed on. Because the idea is if you take the power of initiative in your hand, then the tough decision making spots get onto your opponents. And you can sometimes get hero folds out of them from even better hands. So in that particular spot, I think we could have jammed ace-8 with our 17 big blinds instead of open and then calling him. Because ace-8 is a hand where if we open and we get jammed upon, more often than not, we are beat.
We'll be folding.
So that's something. These are the major takeaways, I believe.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prajit. You put it very aptly, very succinctly, and very eloquently. This is a lot of good content for all our users and our viewers. And thank you again. Thank you again. And I wish you also the best of luck on the virtual felts. We'll be trading words and discussions. And it's good, man. It's healthy. I mean, the whole idea of the stream was so that we could do an X-ray, which people don't really get to see too often, the entire journey. That's very rare. We just discuss spots. But this was an upward thing. So I really do appreciate your input and giving time for this. And hope we can, have a back and forth pretty often.
Sure. This was fun and super interactive. It was insightful, I believe, for everybody who's going to be viewing this because it gives a perspective of A, the winner of the tournament and what his thought process was. B, a third party coming in and reviewing certain spots and understanding, where we could have maybe gained a little more value, where we could have avoided certain spots and stuff like that. So this is something I believe will be insightful and usable by everybody who's viewing this. So thank you for this opportunity, man. This was super fun and a good initiative that you took up.
Cheers. All right, thanks. And that is as open book as a person can get, playing it on the stream and then x-raying it and analyzing it. Great. So, all right, Prajit, thank you so much. And we should get this up. And all right, cheers.
Peace. Take care, man.
Cheers.
And on we'll go through the wastelands, through the